Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of the Option Menu Crew podcast for the year of 2021. But this is actually our official episode 15. This is Ryan, your typical host. Happy to be here with you today. And with us, we got the main crew, or most of the main crew, I should say. Ed, how you doing, buddy?
Good. I'm really glad for a new year to start. I really think this year is going to be better.
Yes, Happy New Year to you. Mike, thanks for joining us today. Happy New Year to you.
Hey, how's it going? Happy New Year. Hope everyone had a good holiday.
Yeah, we were talking about that. It seems like we've all been doing well. And last but certainly not least, Mark is with us. Happy New Year, buddy.
Happy New Year to you, and glad that we made it into this new year.
Yes, we all made it in pretty much one piece, so we can be thankful for that.
We've
And
all survived.
yeah, it's been tough, not the easiest for everyone, but we're looking forward to greener pastures. So today on this episode, we are going to talk about monetization in video games. And as we hashed out off mic, that this is a really big topic, and we planned on doing like a super long episode about all the different aspects because everything kind of intertwines. But we realized that that's not really tenable, and we can actually just have a separate conversation on all these different elements. So, me and Ed have been going back and forth on a lot about this, which is what gave us the inspiration to do a dedicated episode. So, today we're just going to talk about subscription services and the way they've been impacting video games and how they have impacted in multiple ways. But there was a very specific concept that is the reason why we focused on subscription for today. And Ed, why don't you start us off by telling us about why you want to talk about subscriptions today?
Well, as most people probably know, Microsoft has really strongly been promoting their service Game Pass, both on Xbox and PC. And for many people, it's become a really attractive offering. For me, I'm kind of mixed on it, which is why I thought it would be a good topic of conversation. Even starting with Game Pass, we know there's a lot of other subscription services like PS Now, Amazon Luna is just coming. Stadia sort of has a subscription. And really, you can even consider Nintendo Switch Online a subscription because it does come with playable games. So I think it's a really interesting topic that, like it or not, is going to be a big part of the future of gaming.
Yeah, and maybe the best way to start off this conversation is to kind of define what we mean by subscriptions, because we did list a lot of things, and it might help all of us to be clear on what we're talking about and what it is, because I think it's kind of common sense what a subscription is. It's any kind of like recurring payment or a service or good. And then we'll get into like our expectations. But like you said, we're talking about not only the game subscription services of like Game Pass and PlayStation Now, but we're also going to lump in the different gaming subscription services such as Luna and Stadia, which are actually like supposed to be streaming gaming services in which you don't need to own a dedicated gaming hardware. It's just kind of a service that's added on. Although Stadia is still kind of operating in a semi-dedicated hardware space, but branching out. Xbox is getting ready for X Cloud and more. But then there's also the online subscription services, or the, I don't know if you want to call them membership services, that like PlayStation Plus, Xbox Live, Nintendo Online, like those exist as well. And even beforehand, there was MMO subscriptions, so those have been around for a while as well. Gaming has been dealing with subscriptions, and the landscape's grown and changed as the online networks have evolved and persisted. So I don't know if you wanted to point out anything else specifically about like what you do or don't consider a subscription service.
I will say that subscription services, subscriptions for online services like Xbox Live and PlayStation Plus, those are not new, and Nintendo Switch Online mostly falls into that category. MMOs are also a pretty old business model, so those aren't really what I'm talking about when it comes to this topic.
Mm-hmm.
What really interests me is the idea of paying a fixed monthly fee for a library of games that you can play any of them, any amount, really an unlimited access, kind of like what you see with movies and TV now with Netflix and Hulu, and really seeing how gaming is experimenting with that sort of business model.
Unlimited power.
So why don't you go over why subscription services or game subscription services are something you're pretty hesitant on?
Well, I don't think it's bad to give gamers options, and I think if you also have the option, the main thing I'm concerned about is the way it works with like Netflix or Hulu or other video services is they often have exclusives that you can only access by paying that subscription. And currently with Game Pass, any game on Game Pass you can also purchase separately. And I'm very much happy with that model that you can either pay a subscription to access, and if you no longer want to pay the subscription or you want to own the game for yourself, you can purchase it separately. So the only thing that kind of worries me is that if more people are paying for these subscriptions and it becomes a more popular way of distributing games, I don't always want to pay for a subscription to access a certain game. So I guess I can see a lot of positives. I can see, and we can go into this in a little more detail. I can see how it would be good for gamers. I can see how it would be good for developers and publishers. But I wouldn't want to see it take away from the options available to consumers.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point there bringing up Netflix, and I just want to expand. And we were talking about this before, is Netflix did kind of start as with exclusives, and they certainly do have their exclusive shows. That's kind of what justifies them existing over the other ones, especially now that there's more competition for movie and TV show streaming. But Netflix has also started selling Blu-rays or even digital copies to own of their exclusive shows. Like I've seen Stranger Things Blu-rays, and maybe not every show gets that, and I'm not sure like if there's a standard amount of time before they put that stuff out for standalone purchase. But that I think is a good indicator that standalone purchase isn't going away, because if anything was going to stay that way, it would be like Netflix or Hulu and other shows that like it would you'd already see it like really slowing down and being like we're not offering these anywhere else. And companies like Disney, they've just opened up Disney Plus. Like they have no reason to start not selling the stuff standalone, because they can kind of get consumers to double dip on that, because then they're paying for the service plus buying the standalone product. So I feel gaming will probably maintain that. So I don't think that's too scary, but I agree with the fear that any of these services could be used against us, because as we've discussed separately, ownership becomes really tricky, and that's part of the reason like Google Stadia kind of fell apart. So I want to toss over to Mark, because you're our resident Xbox expert there, and you had some extra data you wanted to talk about that. So what are you seeing in terms of like the monetization, if that's in line, or not the monetization, the profits, or how the economics of the systems are working from the information you've found, and how that
Yeah.
relates to the information you know about like Xbox Game Pass, xCloud, and those related services right
Yeah.
now?
I'll kind of generalize a little bit. I've heard some interviews from Phil Spencer before as far as like how they break out the profiting, and from what I've gathered, because they haven't spelled it out exactly how they share that revenue. If you're, let's just say Xbox Game Pass had 100 games, which now they're well over that number, but that was the original sort of guarantee back in 2017, was you'll have access to over 100 different games. And all right, well, if I'm paying $10 a month, who gets that share? I think they are actually taking a proportion of, all right, well, I spent 2 hours on this game, 4 hours over here, so they're kind of trying to share that money. I think some studios also do have direct, or like full contracts that we'll pay you or you'll pay us. Like I've heard there is a little bit of back and forth there, so it's not very black and white, which I feel like for the outsiders that's very confusing. But we're the gamers, so we just want to play as many games as possible. I have heard great things like studios making bank after they go on Game Pass after not having, they released and then a year goes by and they're still, in red as far as their bottom lines, and they go Game Pass and things are all butterflies and rainbows. But pretty much the lens that I'm kind of looking at this is video games haven't really changed in terms of pricing in the past 20 years. We have heard with next gen, they are looking to hike that up about $10 to be about a $70. I don't know, Ed or Ryan, if you guys have had any more insight on that. I heard NBA was like one of the big ones that was $70 base price. That's what it is.
PlayStation has stated that their price range for first-party games is going to be $49.99 to $69.99. Like
Okay.
how Miles Morales was $50, but Demon's Souls was $70. So they're targeting a range.
Okay.
Also, just a fun side note
Yeah.
is that for Spider-Man Miles Morales on PlayStation 5, the base version of the game, which is just Spider-Man Miles Morales, was 50, and then if you bought the special edition, which comes with Spider-Man Original Remastered, that is then $70. So Miles Morales they consider like a smaller game, but you can pay a full price and essentially pay an extra $20 for the full remaster and have the two games. Plus, I believe all the DLC for the original Spider-Man is included with the remaster, so you can get that as like a big collection for the price of one new next gen, current gen game, however you want to call it at this point.
Mhm. So again, going back to kind of like how I'm looking at subscriptions, like I think it has to be, the like going back real quick to, we were talking about Netflix, Hulu. I made a list as we were kind of going through that: Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO, Peacock, Apple TV, Sling, Amazon Prime, YouTube, Fubo. Like there are so many. Like I understand and I share that frustration when it comes to subscriptions for streaming services. Like it's ungodly. I think between my wife and I think we only have one, maybe two of those of the 10 that I just listed, just because it's like there's too many, and I think that's for a whole nother topic. But that I think is a direct cause from cord cutters and people getting away from cable TV. Staying with video games, I think just the fact that the pricing hasn't changed all that much again in the past 20 years, where if we look at another industry very similar, such as video games, such as movies, that pricing has actually increased about 72%. About $540 back in 2000 was the average price of a movie ticket. They claim in 2019 the average movie ticket was $9.26, but it's probably been almost 10 years since I've paid somewhere near $10. I remember going to a movie about a year or two ago, and the matinee price was like $15, and I was scratching my head like, wait, this is the cheaper alternative, and I think it was like $20 for the 7 o'clock Friday night showing, which again, a whole nother topic as well. So go ahead, Ren.
It's still relevant because there are logistical reasons for each industry to increase prices. So that's something where we need to talk about what we're willing to do as consumers and what we find tolerable, because ultimately our money is going to decide that. And while there's definitely more people buying into it, and there's a huge convenience factor that is going into why subscription services are becoming more popular, and clearly they're profitable for companies, or else they wouldn't be trying to. There wouldn't be as much competition for this. There'd be much fewer because they just don't make the same money. So
Yeah.
transitioning a little bit, Mike, what are your thoughts on subscriptions, and kind of where are you at on what you're willing to pay for when it comes to a subscription for gaming?
So I think right now, like the Xbox Game Pass is at a pretty good point where it includes the service and the the Game Pass Ultimate includes both
Hmm.
for like $15, where you can play with your friends online and also get access to thousands of games. I was really excited.
Not yet, not thousands yet.
Yeah, not
Okay, a lot of games. Sorry.
Yeah, still a very
Someday.
large amount.
Yeah, you know what I meant. So I guess I think that in itself is exciting, but like as other people have pointed out, like I'm kind of worried about in the future, like the whole diversity of am I going to have to own the Nintendo Pass, the Xbox Pass, the PlayStation Pass? Is it, I mean, who knows? Like maybe there'll be like only one box and you're just subscribed to like all these different services in the future. I mean, that's just like PC, I guess, but
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the one thing, because I also used to have a train of thought about like, oh, I want the one console, one box experience, and as I've gone on and had additional conversations, that's kind of a dead end way of thinking because it leads to monopolization. However, with the PC, we kind of see how that might diversify because there is a bunch of marketplaces that have existed. Like the PC is itself one platform or one type of platform, and of course you've got Windows OS, you've got Mac OS, and you've got Linux and a bunch of those other offshoots. So the compatibility, besides the compatibility, even let's just focus on Windows necessarily, with Mac being a close comparison to that, with not with its own unique properties. But Steam, while being the dominant force for games currently on PC, we see good old games, or GOG as it's also referred to as. We see Epic now coming out with the Epic Game Store, and despite the details of how that is, it does exist. We've seen EA and Ubisoft put out their own exclusive platforms for distributing their PC games on there, and going back and forth on support for that across different platforms. So the competition will still exist, and I think that works because it is an open platform, and at the same time Microsoft kind of allows it because now they compete also in that space with the Microsoft online store or Windows Store. Which one is it? What's it called, Mark? Exactly.
The I missed that. Sorry.
Is it Microsoft Store or Windows Store for like their App Store?
I think they've switched it back. I'm Microsoft Store. Sorry, I had to just double check. Yes,
Yeah,
Microsoft. They've switched the name on that so many times I can't even keep track anymore.
right. I just want to get that clear. Oh, also Activision Blizzard has BattleNet. So all of that competition is still there. So the one box in terms of hardware could exist, but it can't be controlled by one single company in a way, although Microsoft is kind of leading that, but there are alternatives. So I don't think there's a problem with consoles and PCs existing, and I think we shouldn't be focused on one platform, though there are ways that things will consolidate, and I think as consumers we should think about what's a smart way that consolidates for our convenience while also balancing the needs of being able to fund developers to continue making video games properly and allow for hardware innovation and competition to thrive, or else we will get to a situation where the doomsday scenario Ed's kind of afraid of, which is you'll own nothing, we'll always just pay for that. They can take that stuff away from us whenever they want, and it'll never be something you could truly own, even though we're kind of living in a limbo space right now of that we seem to a lot of people seem to be okay with, but that might speak to a broader cultural feeling about entertainment. So that's for a different episode.
Well, people who know me know that I kind of cling to my physical games, so I definitely am on the side of I like ownership, even though the
But
reality
you,
of it is you still only have a license to the game, so
yeah,
maybe it doesn't matter anyway.
even if you own that physical cartridge, whatever it may be, or the disc, like you still technically you're owning the license to play that. And
Yep.
sure, it's a lot more difficult to take, someone knock on your door. All right, your time is up with Crash. Hand it on over.
My idea of what will probably happen is it will probably be integrated into the smart TV. That's what I think the future will be.
I believe that's what
Yeah.
Amazon and Google are trying to do with Stadia and Luna, is just get the apps and eventually xCloud as well.
I think xCloud is very much we're already in the beginning. It's not. I don't think it's on iOS yet, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Aren't they still working on, well, isn't there like a
I think
browser
so.
solution now instead of an app store solution?
I think
Yeah,
so.
that's what
Just
I heard.
to bypass the
Yeah,
whole Apple
yeah,
Store thing, similar to what Fortnite has also been trying to push back on. Also, wanted to clarify real quick, Mike. There's actually 499 games on Game Pass as of today, the 2nd of January.
Wow.
Only disclaimer of that is this is including all console, PC, and xCloud games, because that is something that they have been including as of lately. Is the inclusion of all of those xCloud games. So personally, I haven't tried much of that since its original beta state, but the fact that it's very clear, I have the app on my phone, I can view it all on my computer as well. But what games can I have? What platform do I have to play them on? It's not necessarily a split of, all right, well, I have a PC, so I can play the same game on PC. There is a little bit still of a segmentation there of, well, this one is only available on console, this one may only be available on PC, for example.
So only 501 to go until we have 1,000 games on.
Yeah, but the fact though, this Game Pass launched 2017, so we're closing in on its 4th year, and I think that's pretty impressive. We were talking off the air earlier. I've had it since 2019. Sea of Thieves was the first title that really kind of sparked my interest. The fact that it was a first-party game going immediately into Game Pass, and at the time I could pay $1 to just try it, and I think I even got like a 3-month trial out of it somehow, because I'm a deal hunter like Ed, and yeah, since then I have my Game Pass subscription via Ultimate through December of 2021. So I'm in it for the long haul. I don't want to jump the gun, but I absolutely think that it's something that's going to just migrate eventually to be, hey, if you want to play games online, Xbox Live plus Game Pass is all going to be one collective service. It's always felt a little questionable. I think Xbox Live took a hit years back when, well, you'll have a free version of Xbox Live, but in order to watch Netflix, you have to pay for gold back in the day. And that really, I think, put a bad taste, and they quickly changed that. But still, it happened. So how they progress forward, I think, is still to be determined.
Yeah,
I was excited. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was gonna say I was excited when EA hopped on with the Game Pass. I mean, that's the last time. That's when I decided to get it. I mean, I know, I like sports games and I like Star Wars, so I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah, and what I think is awesome about that is you get access to their older library, and then you get game trials to a bunch of their games, like Star Wars Squadrons, which just came out, I think, over the summertime. You can play up to 10 hours, which is 10 hours is a lot. I think the average
You can
gamer
almost beat that game in 10 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
And then there's rumors as of very recently that Ubisoft is also coming at some point in early 2021, but nothing concrete there. Bethesda obviously is going to be a huge player once I think that is all approved and finalized as far as legal goes. It certainly speaks much more into the first party titles. That's always one aspect that I've always mentioned is you can play your Forzas, your Halos, your Gears. A lot of the other games that kind of come in and go as they see fit. I was sad. I thought Red Dead Redemption 2 was still on there, but I quickly learned that game was only on there for about 2 months before Rockstar pulled the plug on that. So it's interesting. It seems like some of the bigger studios might still be testing that a little bit, but yeah, I mean it's grown. It's huge.
Yeah, and for Red Dead 2, 2 months is only about enough time to get to Chapter 3 in that game.
So, Ryan and Mark, you mentioned you were talking about how this would benefit developers and publishers, and how maybe this would help them be more successful and get paid for their work in a way that they might not if people had to buy their games a la carte. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I've thought about with regards to the positives and possible negatives of a subscription like Game Pass. First, the positives that I've thought about is like how video streaming services now often are able to take chances on properties that really are kind of out there. Like I think you watched this, Mike. Remember that on Netflix they did a series for the Dark Crystal, which
right.
Who would have thought that they would make a TV series based on a cult movie like the Dark Crystal, but they did. And they've done stuff like Castlevania, which I thought was fantastic. They've also brought back series that were canceled before. Like one of the original ones they did that with was Arrested Development. And I could see where a service like Game Pass could be able to take chances on games that might not be made if they really had to depend on retail sales or digital sales to make back their money. So I think that's a positive thing. But I also think that's kind of a double-sided coin where a lot of what you have in these streaming services, in my opinion, is pretty mediocre, which I guess that's just the nature of the beast. But I feel like you spend a lot of money making a lot of content to maybe keep you subscribed in the sense that you can justify it based on how much content there is. But there are really only a few shows that really stand out. but maybe that's worth it. So I can certainly see how that business model of having a constant stream of revenue could be positive for both developers and publishers, and also for consumers. I just wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and you're absolutely right. I mean, as far as the 499 games on Game Pass, I primarily continue to still play Gears 5, like not 24/7, but by far over anything else. But all right, well now I have I have a trial to Squadrons. I could play that for an hour or two, and if it's more or less a demo because I feel like we haven't had demos in games for quite some time now. But yeah, it's something that it's great to just hop into a game, try it out, or play something different. They do have kind of like what all recipes have with their dinner spinner. They do actually have a, let's just find a random game and do you want to install it type of thing on Game Pass, which I think is really funny. Not that I've ever necessarily just pressed it and like, all right, I'm just going to play this game and check it out. But yeah, you're definitely onto something as far as there's only a small percentage of gamers that are actually playing, more than a couple handful of games.
So my main point in favor of subscriptions is trying before you buy. I'm a big advocate of try before you buy, whether that's demos or renting or even subscription services where you're paying a fraction of a price to be able to try games, because there's so many different types of games, and you can spend different amounts of money on them, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, or sometimes they're mediocre, and it's kind of a risk you got to take. And it's balancing trying to be a responsible consumer with also wanting artists, the developers, to get the money they deserve for even experimenting. Because even if a game isn't great, it's still worthwhile experimenting to figure out what that is. And I really wouldn't want a studio just go bankrupt just because, okay, well, some of our ideas worked out and some of them didn't. And then the way this industry kind of cannibalizes talent and creativity, we need to adjust that. So I feel like subscriptions are helping adjust that cash flow back in and getting us some more creativity along with the indie space. And there is more flexible pricing in the indie space. So the industry of video games has changed pricing in a bit, but it's in a very unique space, and it's taken a very different trajectory because of like DLC and things like that. So that's a point I want to revisit in a moment. But I want to get back to kind of where we want to take this as a logical point of like, where do we ideally want this to be balanced? And Ed, based on your thoughts here, I feel like you just kind of want the choice and you want a guarantee that the things won't go away. So tell me if this kind of sounds like what you'd want as an ideal, and I don't necessarily disagree with this either. And then we'll kind of go around the room and critique this. But do you just want there to always be the choice? Like you can buy the shows because of the Netflix point, the game standalone, as well as there being like a subscription service. So if you want to like pay a monthly fee, then you can try out this rotating catalog. Just don't want to have to feel like you're locked into one or the other. Or is there something else you want, like a guarantee to make you more comfortable with? I mean, or do you just want subscriptions to change or not to exist?
I just would like the option. I don't think subscriptions are bad. I just don't want to have to be forced to subscribe to something to play a certain game.
Oh, I know.
And
Sorry, let me interrupt
and
because I did have one more point that I was posing is because based on what you said, and we've talked about this to the side as well. So you'd probably want subscription services to also offer like a really easy one-time payment thing, so that way you don't have to worry about the recurring thing. Because that's, they try to trick us, or not necessarily trick us, but try to get us comfortable with just leaving our credit card information on file and doing the auto renews. So you'd probably be more comfortable if like Game Pass had a option where you could just go one-time charge of $15 for 30 days of access to the service. Is that something you'd like to see?
honestly, I don't care how they have me manage it because I'm perfectly capable of managing subscription. I'm the kind of person who calls every year telling SiriusXM that I'm going to cancel just to get the better price. So I have no problem with doing that. It would be nice, but I often will subscribe to something for a month and then cancel it the next day, knowing that I'll still have the month. So that's not really a problem for me as far as managing subscriptions. But yeah, I guess that could be useful, but I think that's unlikely because most subscription models are, they thrive when they have you auto renew. So I don't expect that from any subscription, that they would not have auto renew enabled, at least by default.
A
Okay.
yearly option would be nice, though. I think, like, even if it does subscribe or resubscribe automatically, I think it would be nice to have like that kind of option, like Amazon Prime.
Yeah, Amazon Prime is a great value for what you get. But
I think
yeah, if it were yearly and it were what, like 12 months for the price of 10, kind of how like Disney Plus is right now. I mean, that would be I
Yeah,
think a fair trade-off for committing to a year of the service.
yeah, and that seems like
completely agree.
yeah, it's kind of the deal they go for is that you pay more up front, but you lock yourself in and then you get a slight discount for it because that becomes guaranteed money for them rather than them running the risk that you will unsubscribe one of the months and they won't get like a full year's worth. So instead, they just kind of charge you more up front, which I don't mind. Having that be an option for all subscription services is like some sort of one-time payment or ways to prevent the auto renew from kicking in at the point of transaction rather than requiring follow-up would be more convenient for users. And who knows what would happen because at the same time, microtransactions is like a weird thing that people have no problem doing recurring transactions even though they're not subscribed. So I think that could work, but it hasn't been something that I've ever really heard discussed on other conversations with subscriptions. So yeah, I wanted to go back around and say like Mike, so is there anything about subscriptions you would like to see changed in order to make you more comfortable with them? Or one of the other questions is prices eventually go up. So is there specific features or things, aspects to subscriptions that would make you comfortable with prices adjusting?
Yeah, that's hard because it's like you even see it like with Netflix and stuff, where a few years ago we were paying what, like $11, and
I
now
think
it's up to
it was as low as like $5 just for the streaming, and then the DVDs and Blu-rays were bundled in, and they became
right.
separate at some point.
Yeah, now is it 13 or 14? I don't know if someone could fact check that.
I think it's 12 for the basic streaming service, and then I pay for the premium, the 4K one, which also allows for multiple consecutive streams up to 4, and that's like 15 or 16, I think. It might be a little higher,
Like
but
15.99.
yeah. And for
Um,
and for me, like for example, I thought the thing that justified the additional expense for me was not necessarily the 4K or HDR access to streams. It was having the 4 consecutive streams because, as many of us probably do, we share our accounts or are using shared accounts with family for our streaming services. And I'm not sure how that exactly works for Game Pass. I think or PlayStation Now. I think you can log into like just other systems with your PlayStation account and you have access just like anything else. I don't know how that works if someone else tries to log into your account and simultaneous streams. That's where I found the value because I know that and I've had a few experiences where more than 3 people or more than 2 people were trying to stream at once and there was connection issues. So in order to try and just avoid that, I was like, this is totally worth it. I do watch enough content on here that I feel it's justified. So that is a feature that justified the price for me. So I don't know, Mike, if you can think of anything that makes you comfortable when prices go up. Is there something they could tell you, like, we're definitely adding this or doing this? Like, is it the number of games? Is there something else? I
well, as
have an
long as
idea,
it
but
wasn't like a yearly, because I feel like Netflix right now it's like a yearly like dollar increase, or I don't know if that's justified, because I mean eventually we're going to get to paying, like it's just going to be like we're paying for cable again,
I
or
would say
like
maybe even worse.
it was kind of crazy with YouTube. I know this is not gaming, but like YouTube TV, like I feel like that was like $40, and then all of a sudden it's like $65 in like a year or two.
hmm,
Like,
The reason for that though is because it's basically like cable now, where it's not a la carte, and that's where you run the risk of with Microsoft adding all these other companies' content is, you'll be paying for this huge service with maybe content from a lot of studios and publishers that you're just not interested in. So
Yeah. Like right now, I'm pretty comfortable with what Game Pass is, and I was able to get like a special deal for it to get it a lot cheaper than the $15. But I'm fine with paying $15 a month for such a great service as Game Pass.
And that's
Uh,
where we get into an issue with like the consolidation, because that's what cable TV was a huge consolidation where you just pay for those packages, but you were paying one price. And yes, the prices did get out of hand, and eventually you're paying for tons of stuff you didn't want. And now with streaming, we're in a weird period, and so it kind of sounds contradictory. So is there really a difference between paying $15 a month for three different services that all have a variety of content that you may or may not watch, than paying one place $45 for all the same content? It feels like we kind of make the same arguments in opposition to getting the value that we want. So I don't know if anyone else here is thinking like we need to take a step back and kind of reevaluate, because I feel like I pay for a number of services, but every single one of them, I know exactly what value I'm getting from them, and all of them have their own justification. And it's still, at least for now, cheaper than cable, and I'm getting a lot more of what I want. I'm almost be afraid for us to go back to too much of a consolidation with Netflix, where it's like that. But maybe we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. We're like, no, we want everything in one place, but we want it to be cheap.
well, we're getting off a little off topic going to video streaming services, but they're still better because most of them have no ads. You can turn them off month to month, and you can share them easily. So it's still way better than cable was. But that's video streaming, not games.
as
So
far as like
we're bringing that.
competition goes, that makes sense, like what you're saying, because like if you have like the EA, the Ubisoft, and and Microsoft, and they're all competing versus if they're all in one thing, and then you're just paying like exorbitant amount of money for everything versus just paying for specifically what you want. I don't know.
Right. So that's an interesting point there, is video games are unique in that they literally have platforms and that are independent from each other. They're all kind of these neighboring walled gardens. So Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft have Xbox, PlayStation, and well, Switch now, but Nintendo has always been its own beast. So they kind of have the right to control their walled gardens, because that's just the way that kind of works. So to reiterate a point, would it be would it be acceptable if, say, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony each said to themselves, like, hey, when you subscribe to they each have their own individual service? As we were aware of, Microsoft was trying to shop around Xbox Game Pass to other consoles, but anecdotally, Phil Spencer, one of the presidents at Microsoft at Xbox, was saying they weren't biting. They weren't interested in that, and that makes sense. We heard the rumors about XCloud trying to get on Switch, and Nintendo most likely said no, we don't want that. So should that would that be cool if like PlayStation has its gaming subscription service? So let's say PlayStation Now, for since it does exist right now, that EA and Ubisoft couldn't launch their own independent thing on there, but they could partner with Sony to be like, okay, you get to add your games, your catalogs can be added to PlayStation Now. You can't have your own thing, and then we do a profit share. Like, should that be mandated, or do you think that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo all have an obligation to let those competing services enter their closed platforms?
I think it is a better experience for users to be able to get their games to the same platform, like everything being funneled through Game Pass. But I think it would be more ideal if you had the option to turn on and off channels that you may not have interest to. So maybe the base cost of Game Pass would actually be more like, I don't know, $10 a month, and you could add channels on top of that. I think that would probably give people the most choice. But I wouldn't want to have multiple services with different interfaces, kind of how it is on PC, where you have Epic Games, Good Old Games, you have Steam, and I think a console is a lot more attractive to me if the interface is more unified. But I'm coming from a standpoint of someone who likes the Apple experience, where I have things more uniform. I know you have more of a PC background with your PC gaming, so maybe you'd be more tolerant of more variation among the services. I'm talking to you, Ryan.
Yeah, and I'd be okay with the concept in general. I think there's definitely rules you could just put in place for the systems, because I think ultimately what messes this stuff up is the companies compete for who's getting the dollars instead of just being happy with everyone's getting some money and getting some more money that they wouldn't have had before. And that's where the competition comes from, where they want to create all their different services. Is they're all trying to cut out that middleman. They don't want to cut in Microsoft more than they have to, or whatnot. But that's where we get into this bureaucratic debate of, does Microsoft have the authority with Xbox, since it's their platform, to say that no, like if you want to add your games to a subscription service, it has to be Game Pass because that is our box. Whereas with like PC, you can have all those different platforms coexisting and trying to compete for people's dollars, but you lead to requiring multiple launchers and those exclusivity deals to justify it. And I'm not a fan of what Epic has done with buying temporary exclusivity to third-party games on PC, or extended exclusivity. So let me toss it over to Mark. What's your feeling on what console makers should have to do when it comes to the subscription service? Should they require them to be consolidated into their independent, singular offering on the console, or should the console platform holders be required to allow for diverse gaming marketplaces on their platforms?
Well, number one, competition is definitely, better for us consumers. Having more options lowers the price, or keeps the price more manageable than having only one option. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of just the way of the land. I think we also kind of know the answer though, because EA, Ubisoft, they've all had kind of their own exclusive. I think Ubisoft was one of the more recent ones just in the last couple of years. They pushed their own service as well, but I think that they're finding that they're just not panning out. Game Pass seems to be a much better value with way more games, so let's get in before the door closes type of scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we kind of have that answer already, in the sense that these developers have tried and unfortunately maybe not succeeded in the way that they want to. That's where I'm personally a little bit split. I cannot draw, or I cannot. I'm so against how many different clients there are on PC. Like, it drives me insane. It really does. Similar to all the different streaming services, not to go back there, but I just, I don't want to download 5 or 6 different launchers for 5 or 6 different games that I play in one calendar year. That's a little much. So it's nice to be able to just kind of go to one channel for everything. But that's also where, all right, well, pricing might increase. And I think Mike's also got a good point about, I also want to clarify one thing real quick too, Ed. $10 is the base price for Game Pass, at least last I checked. $15 is their ultimate version.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right.
Which includes a little bit more, like the EA access and also PC and also gold, but also does give you PC and console experiences, opposed to when they launched it. I think it was late 2019. I think it was only $5 on PC. I don't know. I imagine it's probably $10 there as well.
I think it is now.
Yeah. But yeah, going to Mike's point, and now I'm losing my train of thought. It was, I refresh my memory.
Well, so I can interrupt because you were bringing up a point, and this is where I'm saying I feel like maybe we're being a little hypocritical, because we complained about cable being too expensive, but it's everything in one place, and we wanted a la carte, and now we have a la carte sort of with the different streaming services, and now we're complaining that that there's too many things to have to go in. So I suppose it's about striking that balance, as we want sort of a happy medium. And I think that speaks to human psychology, is we do want choice, but we only want so many choices.
I think Ed's idea was good though, there with that, where you turn things on and off, you pay extra, but you need enough options where, like, a lot of streaming services, like they only give you a few options versus, or I'm talking about like Sling or YouTube TV. They only give you a few like premium options. They don't give you like, you can't be like, I want this channel, this channel, this channel, and this channel, and turn all the rest off. I wish there was more options like that.
So I was interpreting that as you want some curation tools, which I think is fine. We just don't want to, we want to avoid a scenario where within the services they try to do like the cable thing of tiering their services. I think you should pay like the one, when you pay a fee, you get access to the entire library at once. It's not gating off anything, maybe feature wise. And then this is something that's been an ongoing discussion with Netflix because a lot of people complain, oh, a lot of this stuff's crap or I don't want to like it. At the same time, there's something to be said about discovery needs to happen. We need to give new content a chance. You never know when you're going to find something new that you might like. But that's where I think we have a happy medium where you can save things to a personal list and you can click that and the algorithms that they have start kind of curating what they show you. And at the same time, they're mixing in like, here's the stuff that's new and just came out. Here's stuff related because you watched this. We recommend this. So that's also where I think we need to be open to being allowed to be, I guess I'll say marketed to, but we also need to find that balance where you can be exposed to new things and are open to finding new things. And maybe you just want that in a different way. Is that something you'd say, Mike? Like, how would you want to be introduced to new things if you're not letting that service maybe kind of sometimes show you new stuff? Like, do you have an idea of how you'd want to strike that balance?
Well, maybe like you pay like $10 for Game Pass Ultimate instead of $15, but you just get Microsoft exclusive content, and then if you want to add another developer, you pay a few dollars more to add that developer.
So you would be
That's how Sling does it. Basically, you can get a base package, and if you want something like Stars or I guess maybe not HBO now, but you could add one of those. That's what I was kind of thinking. But you might be right that a tiered approach ends up being worse for consumers.
right. I think like the feature wise, it could make sense like with Netflix where you get 4K access and then four consecutive streaming lines is what justifies the higher price tier. But it's all the same catalog. You could still watch things without 4K. You could still just have two consecutive streams going. I think that's where we get into a problem where you're trying to turn off content or you're paying different prices. But at the same time, it also sounds like you guys would be willing to do that, or at least Mike, it sounds like you're willing to pay for different curation because you're trying to manage. It sounds like you're approaching this from a cost management thing, which makes sense. So, what feels the most appropriate to you? Do you really want to pay just more for a bigger catalog and pay less to like shrink it down? And that didn't really answer my question. Is what do you want to do for discovery? Because from what you've said, it sounds like you're like, well, if I hear about something new that I want to, then I'll pay more for a little bit, and then I want to go back down to my old thing. So you're willing to just pay more on the fly whenever there's extra stuff, rather than pay a single flat fee and you just can have whatever whenever you feel like it. So is there
Right.
where's your thinking going on that? Is that really what you want, or is there um, something we're missing?
No, that's exactly what I'm thinking. But I mean, I can see the negatives from it too, but that's where I'm coming from as far as if you want to try some different developers' games, then you pay like a couple extra bucks for those games, or to have access to that. And also, a good thing about that is like Microsoft doesn't have to be like, it's easier to split the. I mean, we're not the businesses, but it's easier to split the like how much money each company gets. Like you see like, oh, this they're paying like an extra $3 for this service, so that's what they're going to get, versus, oh, we have to look at all these crazy analytics to see like how long this game is being played versus how long that game is being played. But as far as, yeah, like you what you said is exactly what I want it.
Can I want to reframe that question you had about discovery and just kind of pose to everyone, how do you guys find the content that you watch or play? Because I have found probably most of the things that I've enjoyed on streaming services or games through podcasts or YouTube videos. Like I rarely go on to Netflix and browse, say, hey, what's new? And I don't think I ever look at recommendations or ads in like the PlayStation Store or anything. I mean, I kind of find things through word of mouth and through content creators that I am interested in. I don't know if I would really want or use an algorithm based recommendation just because that's not really how I discover things right now. But maybe if it were good, I would want that. But that's just not how I operate right now.
For Game Pass, I have like looked at like certain games that like if it's like a platformer or like a shooter, like oh this might be fun to try. But a lot of the times I just go based on like reviews or hearing something good about a game, YouTube or IGN or one of those sites
Okay.
to see what I want to play.
Twitch, just to actually see like gameplay rather than a review that may just show the best, elements of the game, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm in the same boat. I usually, and that's because I'm super active in looking up information, and I will find stuff coming from videos, whether that's YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, the different podcasts I listen to, the gaming podcasts, and listening to their recommendations, trying to find people with similar tastes, or even going on recommendations, friends and you guys and other people who are talking about games and maybe they are interested, or people who know me and be like, hey, this might be something cool. And even then, still, especially with like podcasts, there will be times where they're talking about games I normally wouldn't be interested in, but after they finish describing it, I'm like, huh, that's intriguing, and maybe I'd be willing to try that, for a very low investment, such as a service I'm already subscribed to. That also sounds like that's a separate discussion, is maybe these services haven't figured out how to do proper curation and to let people. I think discovery is definitely a problem, because that's something I hear about on Nintendo eShop. That's something we hear about on Apple App Store or iTunes App Store or whatever it's called.
All
And
the
that,
shovelware.
well, that's a whole different issue, but it is, and that's intertwined with the discoverability, is what's the right answer for curation, and how should we balance that between letting
Just
people.
download everything and play 5 minutes of each game.
And honestly, that would be an amazing thing, is, if people were taking their time and just trying stuff out and more actively, but I don't think people do that, which is why it's such an issue to solve. And that's where, I disagree with you, Mike, on I would prefer to be paying the flat price and be able to have all the access to all the content at once, and that way I'm guaranteed all that new stuff. There's no difference between what I have and what you have. And I don't know this for a fact. I don't know the economics of it, and I'd have to Google it, but I'd imagine there is a benefit on the business side to that consistent price for all users, minus the feature tiers, because then they know how much money they're bringing in, and they can budget that towards bringing in more games or making sure there's better profit share, because there's a consistent level of money coming in, rather than what people usually go for is the cheapest thing they can get if it's relevant, and that might end up making the streaming services less profitable. But it's tough to say, because like I haven't seen Sling's model. I'm not sure how profitable that is compared to Microsoft's. I was trying to get some Googling on some stuff, and there is comments about Phil Spencer saying that Game Pass is not a super profitable service. And that's the thing. Microsoft is such a big company that Xbox is a part of. And so they have a lot of extra capital coming in from different places where they can spend the money to try and make this service more profitable over time. And they can work out those deals for either exclusivity or paying developers. Even if the money isn't coming directly from Game Pass, they can still have a generous profit sharing terms and conditions for the developers they work with. And that way they can still put the money towards people and incentivize them to be on the service, even if it wouldn't make as much money directly from the revenue that comes from Game Pass. So there's a couple other background aspects that play into where the money goes and comes from. So
Yeah, Ryan, I get what you're saying. I just like personally, like I'm just saying that's like having it like that more options within the service. That's what I would want. But
Right.
even though, yeah,
I'm not saying we have to come to a consensus here. I agree with options in general. I wonder because I don't think that our two ideas kind of coexist, other than it would be like a tier. Like you'd be paying, let's say for example, $2 a month for a game. You'd want something where it's like you pay $2 a month and you just get the Xbox exclusive games, the first party games on the service, and I'd be paying $15 and I'd have access to everything. Which that idea on paper doesn't sound terrible, but I don't know how sustainable that would be from a business perspective, and I don't know if that would lead to actually more price gouging the way the cable eventually did with their like premium packages and things like that. So we need more information. I'm not asking for either of us to have the answer to that, but
It's
yeah,
probably not sustainable. I think it's unlikely we get an a la carte approach. I mean, we don't have that with current video streaming services. There's one Netflix with all the content, so I think it's
yeah.
probably
And
a moot point. I don't think that's the direction it's going to go. The direction it's going to go.
and even for a bit there, it wasn't on the streaming, but between the Blu-ray, DVD, the physical side and the streaming side, there was a difference in content, but that has to do with some of the licensing. Like they don't want to put stuff on streaming because they want the money from the DVD sales, or and that's the thing. Like that, the way that works is Netflix buys the certain number of the Blu-rays and DVDs, so they have access to that, but they don't have the licensing to put it on streaming. And that's kind of changed over time because of the convenience factor of not having to wait for something to come in the mail. So yeah, we have to see if some of that is based on profits, which most of it usually is. So there could be decision making where it's already been decided for us. Like they looked at the numbers and they know what does and doesn't work. So those changes might never come, and as it is, things aren't terrible, but certainly we're thinking about what might be better for us.
I do think you raised an interesting point though about how Microsoft has the money to throw around to grow the service, even if it may not be initially profitable, or maybe it's never really that profitable. But I mean, Sony and Nintendo do not have that money to spend on a service that isn't making them a lot of money. So I wonder if they're going to be able to compete or offer a competing product.
Ed, how do you feel about Nintendo's subscription with as far as like giving you like those virtual console games included? Do you think that's a good thing or no?
Well, I kind of wish online play was free. I think it's kind of silly to pay for online play when they really don't offer anything of value. They don't run any servers.
The virtual console type games,
Yeah.
you don't think those
Well,
have
they're
any value?
fun. You and I have played some of the multiplayer games, which has been fun. And I played one of the single player games on the Super Nintendo. Maybe if they add some Game Boy Advance games, because there are some that I played as a child that I would like to play again. But it's okay. I mean, for $20 a year, I really can't find a whole lot to complain about. I mean, I can spend that much on a single meal. So
what's that game that we played a lot? The puzzle.
oh, Panel de Pon. It was
I never.
it was Tetris Attack in the U.S., but it's the Japanese version.
And
That's
it
really
was
fun.
Pokemon Puzzle League.
Yeah, but we're going off on a tangent. But the Nintendo one it's all right. I think they will be the last company to have a subscription service because their games sell and they sell at full price. I think they'd be losing money unless their subscription service was expensive to the point where I don't think many people would want to use it.
Right.
Sure, and that's a couple points there. So Xbox Game Pass is unique in that Microsoft is putting the Xbox first party titles on there day and date with their physical full retail releases. Sony is right now not budging on that, but it sounds like they are considering it because it is such a competitive offer. And if Microsoft ends up having high demand, high popularity exclusives like the way Sony has, if Microsoft does succeed with their studio acquisitions and catches up, that could be a real problem for Sony in the future. But it's something that hasn't happened yet. But for Nintendo, I think it's also important to state that for a lot of those virtual console games, and correct me guys, because I don't really play those ones, there just hasn't been titles I'm interested in. But for some of them, they're not just straight up ports that are carried over. They also update them. Like they have the save state feature isn't there also Rewind? I'm not sure if that's game specific. And then also they've added like online multiplayer for some of
Right.
them. So
Yeah,
they're
Yeah,
not.
that's true.
that's what Mike and I use, and it's cool. I mean, and I like that there's online multiplayer, and they have games that were only in Japan before. They might not be localized. You know, one of the games we like to play, that puzzle game, it's all in Japanese. You know, you don't know what any of the text says, but it doesn't matter. It's a puzzle game, but it's still cool that we actually get that in the U.S.
And like
Yeah,
I
Dr.
mean,
Mario Online.
back in the day before Puyo Puyo Tetris was in the US, I imported it on the Xbox when it was not, I don't know, whatever licensing deal they had. It was making it hard to localize, but you know, sometimes it's fun just to play something that's a novelty, and I certainly wouldn't spend the money on something like that. So
yeah, and addressing your original point. So all of the subscription services pretty much the online multiplayer aspect is kind of arbitrarily locked behind the subscription, except I believe for Microsoft because Microsoft does have the Azure cloud service, which they do like lend servers to facilitate online multiplayer. I'm not sure how much Sony does for that as well, but at least Microsoft, to my knowledge, does actually have some justification because they are making an investment in supporting better online services through their platform. So that's there. But for Nintendo, like you said, there's not really dedicated servers there. The price does reflect that it's 20 a year. And they've instead kind of said like, well, that's arbitrary. Well, they haven't said this, but essentially their marketing message is this is arbitrarily locked here. So instead, we're justifying it with cloud saves, access to our Switch Virtual Console that has enhanced ports, and that's where they've kind of made up with their value. On top of I think there's some other bonuses you get for online, on top of like exclusive offers, whether that's sales or demos and betas and things like that.
and they have Tetris 99 and they had Super Mario Bros 35. So they
E-
have a few exclusive
Exclusive games.
multiplayer games.
Yeah, and that makes sense too because those games couldn't be played without being online anyways. So that's it's one of the most logical things they've ever done in that regard. So
And
I
now
want to,
they're doing more stuff with like game trials and stuff like that. Like you can play a game for like 6 days or whatever.
yeah, and so I keep coming back for to Mike with this question, but I'll actually throw it over to Mark because you've been getting in more into other platforms and things like that. So what makes is there anything that makes you more comfortable with prices going up? Like for example, would you be more compelled or fine with prices going up? And I'm not saying at any particular interval. Obviously, we get annoyed whenever it does, but say they because I did Google this Xbox Game Pass, they don't include all the DLC, but there is a discount if you buy DLC for games on Game Pass. But what if they said, well, we'll just include all DLC now in Game Pass, but it's going to go up, but or maybe it's a tiered approach, kind of like borrowing from Mike's concept, where you could pay 20 a month instead, and now all DLC for any game on Game Pass is automatically bundled in. Do you have ideas on like features that justify more expensive subscriptions?
Yeah, I'd probably sway away from that. Because like the one thing that I feel like I need to say again is like we can buy any of these games independently. You know, it's not like you're being pushed into a corner with Game Pass and it's like, well, I only really want this game and I don't really need all this other crap. Well, then just buy that one game and cancel Game Pass at the end of the day. So that's always an option that I think we need to refresh. I do get discounts on anything that I do buy. Like I wound up buying another Operation on Gears 5 recently and got, I don't know, 10 or 15% or maybe 20% discount on that, which is a nice little kickback. I think that may have been a case by case as far as the DLC. I do remember initially it was all DLC was going to be included, or I know that there were a couple games early on that I played that I was pleasantly surprised that hey, this actually has it. You know, it may have even been a game I owned, and then I was like, oh well, now it's on Game Pass, so now I get all the DLC. I think it was Battlefield, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. Then again, that
So
doesn't sound like it would have been. Maybe I'm thinking EA.
so I want to try and use a specific example here for kind of a counterpoint to what you're saying. Has there been any DLC for Gears 5?
Yeah, they've released 5 different operations and a couple of different like character skin packs.
Do you know how much that costs?
Yeah, $20.
20, how many different packs are there for that 20? Are there like multiple $20 packs or was that all for 20?
There's been 5 different operation packs, each costing $20 a pop usually, but they've also, had sales over the last couple of years.
Sure, sure. We're just going to talk about standard prices
Yeah,
because deals are deals and those come around at different
sure.
times. So of course, if you're willing to be patient and hunt, like that's the responsible consumer thing, you can get anything for a much more reasonable price. But let's say, so 5 times 20, what's that, $250? No,
100.
$100? Oh, yeah,
Yep.
right. Pardon me, bad at math right now. And then there's the $60 for the base game. So that'd be
Mhm.
$160 to get all of that. So
Correct.
what is your line of thinking when that it's $160 standalone for Gears 5 and all its DLC versus you could pay the $20 on Game Pass or the same thing plus a bunch of different games you may also play?
Well, $15 for Ultimate.
I was using my example of it be
Oh,
like the special
yeah,
deal where
yeah. I
15 is the
gotcha.
base and 20 is
Yeah.
monthly is all DLC. So that's where I was bringing that number from.
I think it's the Game Pass is so worth it. Like I feel like that's all we keep talking about.
Right now, it
And
is the
I
best
don't
example. Yeah.
mean to. Yeah, and it really is. I mean, you're asking like, well, basically, should I have paid the full price for the game up front, and then the operations came out like the most recent one just came out like 2 weeks ago, I think it was, or maybe 3, or should I have just paid the 20 or bucks a month for all that additional content? It's a no brainer from my perspective. It's a much lower entry point as far as like that monthly subscription because I get access to all the other games. Like I was trying to think earlier, Sea of Thieves was the other title that I had been playing a little bit here and there, so it's not all just Gears 24/7.
Oh, of course.
Um, but mark my words, I think like after we're talking about all this, like I think it's got to be a no brainer that Xbox, Microsoft, whatever, they've got to increase the price later this year. Throw Halo Infinite on there. If Halo Infinite as a first party, one of the biggest games and known brands IPs on Xbox goes on a Game Pass, and you can just pay a discounted price because hypothetically if Ed could get on there for $1, which is usually like the standard intro price, oh my god, like it would explode. And I don't remember if they have confirmed one way or another. I feel like I've heard rumblings that it's possible it could, or maybe they might, fragment it and that multiplayer may or the story may, one or the other. But that makes complete sense. Also, we're not behind the scenes. That seems like a no-brainer from my standpoint.
Well,
Right.
I'll say about being a no-brainer. Last time I checked the library, I really didn't see that many games that I was dying to play. So I do think it depends on what types of games you like. A lot of the games, and I was looking at some of the games that I finished in the last year or two. A lot of them have either been from Nintendo or other Japanese publishers, and I don't see that many of them. Those kind of games on Game Pass. But I'll have to look again. Actually, I think after this podcast is up, I'm going to take a look at the library just to refresh my knowledge and what's available. But I have to step away for just a moment, so you guys can continue without me. But I just
Sure. Yeah.
wanted to
And I have
interject.
I do have a response, a quick note on that when you come back. So,
Okay, I'll be right back.
so yeah, and I realize how weird I'm actually sounding like I've been advocating for prices to go, or I've been posing questions about prices going up. And it's not that I'm necessarily taking an anti-consumer standpoint. It's about exploring what we're willing to tolerate and what's fair, because there's as I've been saying, I'm trying to strike that balance between good for the consumers but also good for developers, because I want the developers, and I stress that there's a difference between when I say developers and when I say publishers or the industry, because I'm talking about developers getting money and they're still already getting kind of the short stick when it comes to profit sharing between the developer and publisher relationship. And I want them to be more in control of the money they have so we can continue to fund creativity. So I'm trying to strike that balance, and I've been talking about what justifies when the prices have to go up when it makes actual sense, whether that's change because of tools and expenses, studios getting bigger, they got to pay more people, etc. And I'm not opposed to DLCs and expansions. I'm not opposed to options. What I've been just trying to explore is where are our tolerances as consumers to be able to discuss, what are we willing to and are we making the right choices? Because we hear about vote with your wallet all the time, even though vote with our
Mm-hmm.
wallet is one of those things where, and this is something we'll talk on on a different topic when we discuss microtransactions specifically, voting with your wallet is also kind of a lopsided system that doesn't necessarily reflect properly the will of the general public, because free to play has proven that with whales, it's literally the size of your bank account is how big your vote is, and a small minority of people have been driving that industry in a specific direction that's actually counter to actual broader consumer interests. So, going back, I
I'm
agree with
back, by the way.
Awesome. I'll finish my point, and then Mike, remind me to the question about the catalog and Games Pass is that what can we do to allow more people to try games while still giving developers money? I'm a big fan of demos, and we talked about a side idea that I came up with outside the podcast, which was, what if for demos, what if we standardized allowing for paying demos or some sort of better rental period, because that could mix with the subscription where you can either get all of the games for a subscription price, or we could mix in Ed's like a la carte idea where maybe you only do trials for certain games. And I think so they're trying to solve that through game streaming. And at PlayStation Now, I believe allows this. They have both a pay period or a single standalone pay and a rental period, but the rental period is only available through streaming. I don't think it allows for the downloads. Like, you can download PlayStation 4 games. PlayStation 3 games are exclusively through streaming, whereas PlayStation 4 can be downloaded on compatible hardware, aka PlayStation 4 consoles and PlayStation 5, I believe, as well at this point. So with streaming, the game is never fully on your system, so there's no worry about piracy and accidental or intentional piracy because you paid a little bit to get the full set of data. And that's what kind of endears me to streaming, is if that allows us a better way for people to try games, and that's kind of the conceit we have to have. I don't hate that, but I do think that you can't get the you don't get the proper experience streaming, at least not at this point with the current American infrastructure for internet as it is. So maybe like paid demos where that's restandardized. It's like a 199, or even iTunes has shown like people are willing to pay 99 cents for songs, and 129 I've seen, because I do try to buy as much music now as I can after I've sampled it through online means. So maybe that's a reasonable compromise, is more paid ways that developers can get money while letting people try. And as we discussed, Ed, the paid demo then also gives you a discount or towards the full purchase. So you pay $2 up front, you get to play first chapter or so of the game, whatever that is designated, and then the discount applies if you decide to pay and unlock the rest of it. Now that might not work quite as well for other types of games, multiplayer and things, and that's something we can discuss later. So that was the idea I had. But I don't know if anyone else has a concept of that, or we've discussed a couple things where it's just different tiered options where you can pay less for a smaller library of games. So Ed, I just wanted to quickly mention with Game Pass, I think like Square Enix really got in on Game Pass and put on a bunch of Final Fantasy games on there. And I know that's more aligned with your interest. So you'd have to double check what's still on there because that can rotate out. But I did want to say like Xbox has been making outreaches in some. Oh, and Dragon Quest 11 just recently got on there. So
I'm looking at the library. Mark sent a yeah. I see a lot of games that at this point I already have a lot of the games on there that I would want to play.
right.
But if I did become a Game Pass subscriber, I would kind of have to change my behavior as a consumer and maybe not buy as many games because I would be getting them through. But it's kind of like at this snapshot in time, I have a lot of the games that are on Game Pass that I would want to play.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, like I know my cousin, like he's big Xbox gamer, and he doesn't really have any interest in getting Xbox Game Pass because I've like asked him multiple times, but he's like, no, I like to have the physical game on hand. I don't like he'll get the free, the Xbox Live free gold games or whatever, but he doesn't really have any interest in getting Ultimate.
Maybe, Mike, you could ask him, because that kind of perspective is interesting, and we've had these discussions to the side as well. Is maybe next time ask him, what about having Game Pass to try it and then you just buy the physical game? I'd just be curious to hear what his answer is. He doesn't have to commit to doing it, but if you could pose that question to him and let us know what his answer is, that'd be fascinating to hear, because that's what I advocate for, is use these subscription and trial services to figure out what you like and then make the full investment, or at least if you decide then you want to, and then buy it on a sale. I'm not advocating for people to always pay full price for things. I'm just saying getting convinced and finding things that you're willing to fully invest in. So uh, I'd be curious to know what that perspective is.
Yeah, for sure.
So when it comes to these subscriptions as well, I'm also curious because Xbox has experimented with a lot of different things. They've also experimented with doing the payment plans for like Xbox hardware. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, aren't they doing a thing with like the Series S and X now where you can still kind of do like the system leasing, but it's also a payment plan that includes like Game Pass Ultimate with Live?
They are. Don't ask me for the details though. I remember initially kind of looking into it. I think it works for a lot of people. I remember kind of doing quick numbers, and I was thinking maybe that wouldn't work for me. I think you're still paying a little bit more because essentially you're financing it. But
You're
yes,
you're actually paying less.
Are you?
You're paying like $20 less, so it's a good deal. If you're gonna get the console and subscribe, I think it's actually a better deal.
Is that with a trade in though? Do you have to trade in
No,
your
I
Xbox One?
think that's just buying it. They really want you into their ecosystem.
Interesting.
So I do want to know your thoughts on this, but I'm going to toss over to Ed quickly for this, and we'll go around the room. Ed, what are your thoughts on that kind of system where you'd do a payment plan, you'd get the hardware plus all the subscriptions for one single price, and let's say it just includes DLC for the sake of, would you be comfortable, or would you be enticed by subscribing to literally a console and you get the hardware? Yeah, you have to return it if you ever cancel your thing, but you get access to literally everything digitally if you pay like the one flat fee. And can you think of, if that is enticing, what price is it the most enticing at?
For a console and all the services?
Yeah, say like you could go right now to Best Buy and subscribe to Xbox Series. You get the Xbox Series X bundle Ultimate Complete Pass, which is the system, one controller. You'll be able to download and play every single game that's ever released for it, plus the DLC for one subscription price as long as you're subscribed. But as soon as you don't pay that, everything locks up and you have to return the system when it's done. How does that idea sound to you?
Um, I'd give it a shot. I mean, maybe. Yeah, for me, it's like it's so hard to justify something like that because I do have a lot of games that I've bought that I do want to play. It's like I almost feel guilty spending more on a subscription when I have these games looking at me like, oh, you got to play me. But it might be worth it just to be able to try more games, especially now that we've been doing this podcast. It is nice to be able to have a broader opinion and be more knowledgeable about things. But as far as cost goes, I think what they're asking now for the Series S is $25 a month, and I think that's pretty fair.
You said 25 a month?
Yeah, that's for Xbox All Access is what they're calling it.
Okay.
I think for the Series S it's $25 a month, and for the Series X it's $35. And those seem pretty fair, especially because it is less than what you would pay in total for the subscription for 2 years plus the cost of the console.
Yeah, I'm also not a fan of like larger down payments for those things, and I have talked about this with like MMORPGs. I think it's dumb that you'd pay $60 up front and only get 30 days of the service when every continuing month is like $15 a month. So like, why am I not paying? Why are you not charging me 15 for this initial 30? Like, making me pay 60, then that should give me like 3 months. And maybe some of them do that, but a lot of stuff shift to free to play. That's once again side note for another conversation. So Mike, your opinion there? What if like Nintendo for either the Switch or like the Switch Pro, if you could just subscribe to Nintendo, you get the console, etc., games, everything's available for you in this one payment plan, and it locks up if you decide to cancel. You know, how does that kind of offer appeal to you?
So I get the console and I get Nintendo Pass for I have to do like monthly payments
For 24
then-
months. For
for
24,
24 months. So if I don't meet the 24 months, then I have to return the console.
Oh, I'm not even saying there'd have to be some sort of contract length. Like you don't, I don't like that idea either. It's just no, you sign up and the sense you have
Oh,
to.
so I'm basically renting forever.
It would be like that, but you have access to literally everything that's ever on that system, plus the hardware. You don't have to pay the upfront cost for that. You don't have to pay additionally for any of the games that come out or the DLC. Is that something that you think is cool and you'd actually buy into, or is a la carte still the way you'd prefer to go?
No, because sometimes I like to own games too. Like, I don't think that I like to own stuff too.
You could still buy the game separately. It's just a matter of this would be the offer as like an alternative to buying
But
the
then I'd lose
system
the
itself.
console, wouldn't I?
You would, but you could always buy the console on its own as well.
You
This would
mean
be
as a try?
this would be an
Yeah.
alternative to the a la carte. It'd still be an option, but what would you think about that? Would that be enticing enough for you to opt into that system rather than the a la carte? You could always switch out though.
No, I would probably just buy. I would probably just get the actual system, then do this renting stuff.
Sure, sure. And then Mark, same question to you for all that. How does that apply? Like, you're obviously a huge Xbox fan, so let's say for you the scenario is, you're already bought an Xbox, you're fine with that. But what if it was like for Sony, so you could play what few exclusives, but you could also try anything on there? Does any of that sound appealing to you?
I'm really hoping that Sony brings over their games to kind of like a PC storefront.
Mhm.
I know that contradicts what I was talking about with
Sure, sure.
different clients earlier, but that's my hope. It sounds like there's very minor rumblings, but as far like I've been playing the PlayStation 4, right? I think, yeah,
Yeah.
like on and off a little bit. I really wish God of War was just on PC, and then it's like, well, then
A
I
lot
don't
of us
really have
do.
to worry. Yeah, and I'm looking at Xbox All Access. I think that's what you were talking about, Ed. Whether or not
Yeah, that's what it's called.
with this lives in the final. I think it actually you do have to trade in a console from what I was reading. So
Oh, it might be. Yeah, it says upgrade your Xbox One. Maybe you need to trade in an Xbox One. Yeah, I might be
yeah,
wrong. I thought you could.
which is
Okay.
fine that I've got, but I think that was the thing that when it comes to that sort of thing, I always personally think that all right, if I take good photos of this product, I can usually get a little better of a return on eBay. And then also like I have Game Pass, like I said, well now just for I think the next year, but I think that's kind of what prevented me from even going down that road.
I think Ryan, you talked about a Nintendo thing. That is probably more attractive to me than Xbox All Access
Mhm.
because can you imagine? You get the Switch and you're paying monthly. You can try every Nintendo game because there's a lot of Nintendo games I would want to try, but I don't want to shell out $40 to $60 just to try them. And maybe even including in that is you're able to get an automatic upgrade to the Switch Pro, the Switch 2, like because especially Nintendo, although not they like to put out new models of their consoles. They've done that. Although where is the Switch Pro at this point? But that's another conversation. But I
Yeah.
could see a Nintendo version of that being good for their offerings, especially because they put out a lot of first party games that stay expensive for a long time. So it's hard for me to do. Like, I'd like to try Link's Awakening. I would try Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I would try Luigi's Mansion, but I don't want to spend, minimum $40 on them just when I don't know if I'm really going to play much of them.
Yeah. No,
I,
that's an excellent point.
I think that I would definitely agree with that. There's so many Nintendo games they don't get discounted. If they had that type of subscription, I'd be way more interested, and it would give so much more value to than their current Nintendo Online subscription, which I think we are all on the same page with.
And
Nobody.
It would not be cheap though. I can guarantee you
No,
that.
I know. Yeah, but like, what would it be?
I think it would be
80
$30
bucks?
a month minimum.
Okay. I was going to say 80 bucks a year, but yeah, it's got to be even more than that.
Yeah, I could see it being like 120 a year.
Not including the console though. I don't think
Oh,
so.
oh, sorry. If we were talking about Nintendo All Access to coin a term,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I'd easily see like $40 a month, like
Yeah.
40 to 60 a month. But like I said, I am also putting out the pipe dream that it's literally everything that gets released for the platform, not just the first party stuff. But even if it
Oh, I
was,
see.
let's say more realistically, all the first party stuff, and then maybe you get just like a discount or something for the developers that opt in from third parties. into these things. Like, let's say it was like $40 a month, and that's just Nintendo games. Like, it sounds like Ed, Mark, that sounds cool to you guys.
Sounds cool, but once we start getting closer to that $60 price point, I would definitely count myself out because I
Yeah, I don't spend $60 a month on games.
no, that's definitely pushing it for me too. I mean, when we started having this conversation and just getting our notes together, I think I would myself, me as myself 10 years ago, I completely, I think, would have disagreed with everything that I was saying right now.
Okay.
Granted, this platform and all of this structure didn't necessarily exist, but like
Mhm.
thinking back, all right, I'm in college, I'm broke, like I'm just living day by day kind of scenario. Like there's no way I would have been all for a subscription, like ongoing. And I think subscriptions have totally changed like a lot of the pricing structure for so many platforms as a whole in the last 5-10 years. But yeah, I kind of wanted to just add that little tidbit. Like right now, sure, it's not really an issue, whatever it may be. I think it's like $120 for Ultimate for the year. Nintendo Online, what was it, $20, $25? Which also wanted to add a little anecdote. I don't know why we all don't get into a family plan because I think it's like up to 6 or 8 of us. So we could literally lower our cost from $20 to like what, a couple bucks for the year.
Well, that's a conversation to have off recording, but
Yes.
that's a decent point to to bring up. So we could talk about that later. Um, but yeah, we can get ready to wrap up here. So I just want to end on two other notes, which is we've kind of reached a soft consensus, which is we really just want options. There are reasons we think subscriptions aren't the end all be all, which I completely agree with is in general. But it seems like we kind of want options to have, and subscriptions can work really well for very specific reasons. And we've that's where we disagree. Is we've all got our own specific reasons and conditions for whether we would subscribe to something and why we would be willing to pay a subscription or manage a subscription service. So like, Mike has said, like it's really comes down to price for him, and then there's a value dispute. I think all of us are saying there's a value dispute. So I use subscriptions mainly as like a way of trying out games and being able to get around the demo system. So I'm still contributing and being able to try stuff. At the same time, there are rental services like GameFly. They're still out there, and that helps you get physical games instead of digital. And there's an ever infinitely growing library of digital games that aren't available physically to try. So I say to Ed, and I'm not trying to be a super big plug, but hey, that's my number one sponsor hope is if we ever take this thing super big, Ed, like a lot of those games on Switch, you can definitely rent for like $15 or $17 a month, and you could do like you could probably go through, depending on how quickly the mail goes, you can get at least 3 games a month. And if that's 3 Nintendo games, you just saved yourself, 15 minus 180.
That's true. That's true.
So
I've
We
the
need
I've looked at it.
there's also a lot. So I think there's also a lot of math that we can look at, and there's the behind the scenes math that we'll never truly be in on like where the money is completely going and coming from. And that's speaking just from what I'm here today. That's a little more of my specific concern than for everyone else. But I do see also the consumer side because I don't want to pay too much, but I'm happier to pay when I know money's going in a good direction. Sorry,
we
Mike, what
need
did
the
you want to say?
10 I was gonna say we need the $10,000 for 10 years option. I'm j-
Oh, that's like leasing a car. Jeez.
I mean,
Well,
it's true, right?
well, actually, you're saying for more, like Nintendo would be willing to. I guess it depends on what you want to bundle into that idea, but it'd be that'd be
Well, how
crazy.
much? I guess you'd have to include all your streaming services, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and then I think we've also touched on just with these subscription services, there's got to be a better way for all of these things to coexist. But then again, maybe there isn't, and that's something we should meditate on as we close out this episode because I think there's still a little bit, and we'll see. This is still very much a growing aspect of gaming and everything. We didn't even really talk about how streaming services really factor in specifically because that's completely closed off. But I guess once again, it does also boil down to its value proposition. What games are there? How easy does it fit in, and is it of interest to us to do that? And so, yeah, we could think about and we can revisit this at another time, and I'm sure it'll definitely factor into the other monetization topics that we've talked about, because there's so many other parts of video games that are monetized, and maybe subscription is a good answer for that, or at least it's worth bringing up for that. So
So if Game Pass remained the same, sorry, for
that's
10
fine.
years, it would be $1,800. I think you'd be paying if it remained the $15 for the ultimate for 10 years, you'd be paying $1,800 just for
Okay.
that service.
So did you say 10 years?
10 years, yeah.
Okay. So let's say it's a bundle deal. So you pay for 10 years, but since you pay, it's a 10-year plan, but you only get charged for 9 years. So what's the price after 9 years?
Oh,
Because they should always offer that kind of bundle deal.
1620. 1620.
Yeah, he's right.
All right. So is that do you
Actually.
think that's a steal? Would you put down 1620, Mike?
No, I couldn't justify
This is
it.
ludicrous
Like,
now.
yeah, what did you spend this month? Just a 10-year subscription to Game Pass.
Mike's kind of like that guy that we imagine in the boardroom that we actually would all hate, who's like, why don't we do this? We'd make so much money. Would you ever do it? Heck no, I would never do that. That's too expensive.
It's the premium option.
But you'd get the you'd get the promotion.
Lifetime subscription.
It's the Super Apple headphones.
Ooh, that's tempting.
Yeah, the AirPods Max, Game Pass Max.
Yeah, Nintendo also, they have their own philosophy, which is, they see themselves more still as like a toy company, and they want their systems to pretty much be standalone. But, economic realities are also making them a little more open to future-proofing their games, or future-proofing their platforms in order to continue stuff on. So that's once again, conversation for another time. But I really would be curious to see how they handle with the success of Switch and its potential for being like the eternal platform, how they'll handle that going in, and almost afraid that eventually it will just be dropped and we'll have to deal with whatever Nintendo's flight of fancy is with the next thing. So yeah, did anyone else have any last minute thoughts on subscriptions in regards to gaming for today's episode?
I'm definitely interested, like, in the future of subscriptions, just to see like what will happen.
And just to finish off, like you're open to subscription ideas. You're just very picky about it. Is that your stance, Mike? And feel free to articulate however you want.
Yeah, I just would want it to be done in a certain way, which, I mean, it will never be done the way that exactly how I want it, but I'm not like opposed to subscriptions. Like, as I was saying before the podcast, I'm like 70-30 in favor of subscriptions.
I will add this, and I know we're going to sound like corporate shills, which really sucks, but we are an independent podcast, and we're going to be very specific about any brand deals we take. So, Mike, what is your current favorite subscription service you're subscribed to right now, if you can think of it? If not, you can pass. It's fine.
Out of all like video streaming and gaming.
Yeah, you can pick from anything. We'll end with that since there's only like 3 gaming subscriptions right now.
Probably because of the Mandalorian, probably Disney Plus right now for me.
Okay, fair answer. And then we're gonna cycle over to Mark. Any last minute thoughts and your favorite subscription service to date?
Does anyone not know what my favorite one is? Is it not that clear?
Is it HBO Max?
Bingo.
Game Pass?
Yes. They got me. They got me early, and I just thinking about that question, like, do I see myself canceling anytime soon? No. And I mean, that's, I guess, not a bad thing.
Very cool, very fair. Ed, toss back over to you. What is your favorite streaming service, and if you have any last minute points?
Well, I personally don't subscribe to that many. I share a lot with family, but of all of them, I'd say my favorite video streaming service is probably Hulu, because they have a lot of the kind of adult and animation comedy that I enjoy. But of the ones that I personally subscribe to, I really like SiriusXM, because I do listen to it a lot, so I think I get a good value out of it, and I like that it's really convenient to have in my car when I drive. So I don't know how many of you have ever used that, but for me, I've had it. It came with a trial with my car when I bought it, and I've had it pretty much the entirety of my ownership. So obviously, I do get some value out of it. Although I wish they would not make me go through the song and dance of calling to get the deal every year. But it's pretty easy. I actually talked to one of my friends who has it, and he said this. He said last time he called, they actually made it an automated menu. He didn't even have to talk to anyone to get his deal renewed. So I'll be interested to
That's
know
awesome.
when I call. But
Well,
they know people don't want to pay the full price.
I had it for 2 years after I bought my Jeep years back.
Yeah.
It is a good service.
that was an amazing, unexpected answer, and I guess you could say that song and dance is the price you have to pay for that deal. And
I'm
then,
willing to pay that price. It's about 5 minutes every year, so it's worth it to me.
and time versus money. That is also going to be a focus for a monetization episode when we talk about like value of games and all that
Mm-hmm.
on another
Try
undetermined future episode.
try bartering with Nintendo.
They're probably the only one that would actually do bartering for real. So then for me, no, yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just excited to continue the conversation in the future, and I'll probably think up a dozen more. I already have at least a dozen more subscription-related questions of like, would subscription be a good fit for this, or how should we monetize, or what's a more fair monetization to that, or the problems to solve. But my current favorite service, I guess, yeah, I'm just gonna kind of be continue being a shill. Like for GameFly, I've had it the longest. It has been so useful to just be able to try all these different physical games, and I found so many good favorites, as well as just been able to figure out whether or not I like something, and also understand that I've had many crushing disappointments. Star Fox Zero was my quickest return ever. Oh man, I played. I don't think I even played that for 20 minutes, and I was just like, nope, I can't believe it. And just like literally got. It was probably half an hour between me getting it out of the mailbox into the Wii U, trying it, and then putting it back in the mailbox.
I
Wow.
actually bought that game,
And
but I only. Oh, go ahead.
I don't fault you for buying it. I was just extremely disappointed by it.
No, I only played about an hour of it, and yeah.
Yeah, but Game Pass is definitely quickly becoming a close second, and I feel like with my obligation to funding games as much as I can, I believe like I have my Game Pass subscription for PC, and I believe I should probably invest in PlayStation now. I wish it was bundled in with PlayStation Plus at this point, but yeah, I think I'm going to get into that after I do a little more research and see, because that's a great way for me to try a bunch of independent and digital games and see that. And I think there might be like sales and stuff like that is linked to the PlayStation Now as well, and discounts. But regardless, like I'm in a financial position that I can make smart decisions, and I'll deal hunt or whatnot. So yeah, that's me. Guys, we did it. We had a really good episode here. I think we had a great range of opinions and ideas coming through, and it definitely is going to speak to more. Once again, a great way to start the new year off for 2021, and I hope outside of gaming as well, our personal lives go in very positive directions. And thanks so much for the podcast that we've been doing over the last year. And yeah, let's hope there's many more episodes.
I
Looking
think there
forward to
will
it.
be.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
All right,
Yeah,
we'll
thanks
go.
for listening.
Yep, we'll all sign
Oh,
off. We'll go around the room. Yep, you kind of were already doing it automatically. And it was just I thought I'd need to officially say it. So yeah, let's just sign off around the room here, guys. So thanks everyone for listening. Take care.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Keep playing hacky sack.
Get Game Pass.